Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? We do have people continuing to log in, but they'll just come in while we're talking. So welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Experts, everybody. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grant-submission courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So just a reminder that if you are attending live, you're in listen-only mode. You'll see in your toolbar, there's a place where you can ask questions. So go ahead and type your questions in there. You can start typing them at any time. If you have a comment that you want to share with the group, go ahead and put that in the chat box. And if you are watching this as a recording, just a disclaimer that things change really quickly at NIH. So everything that I say today is true to the best of my knowledge, but always check to make sure that policies haven't changed in the interim because things move very quickly there. In terms of what you should be viewing in the library right now, I would say that if you are targeting a cycle 1 deadline, which would be February, March, you should probably be watching, if you're doing an R application or a K application, Master the R Series Chapter 1, which is preparation. And we're going to talk about some of those steps today. And, you know, if anybody has questions or have been having any difficulties in conducting some of those steps, this is a great time to ask those questions. Any NIH updates? Can't think of anything that's come out lately. I mean, the big thing is that we're still under a continuing resolution, which is just a fancy way of saying that NIH doesn't have a budget yet for FY24, which started on October 1st. So if any of you are, if you have any notice of awards pending from an earlier application, they may be held up. Because typically with a continuing resolution, what happens is that NIH operates, most of the institutes choose to operate at 80% of the previous year's budget, just to hedge their bet in case they get a budget cut in the upcoming year. So your notice of award may be held up a little bit at this time of the year. So just hold tight pending any funding decisions. So, okay, let's see. I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we're going to jump right into the tutorial. So let me share my screen. Let's see. Okay, so you should, right now you should be looking at a reporter screen, and I'm just going to grab the URL and put it in the chat. So, let's see, send that to everybody. Okay, so that is where I am right now. You'll see in the chat, there's a URL that indicates where I am. So what I want to talk to you about today, and we had a request for this, and I think the person who requested it, actually, I saw her log on. This is a multi-part request from one of our clients. And her request was that we actually separated to 2 separate tutorials how an applicant in the K or R series might vet their idea on the reporter website, and then in a separate tutorial talk about how you know, pre-award support folks on RD office staff might use reporter in terms of looking at competitive intelligence to figure out, for example, if you're gearing up for a T32 or a center grant application, how to use the reporter website to suss out your competitive intelligence. So this is the first part of that request. This is the, if you are an R or K applicant and you're looking to vet your project idea before you write anything, this is how you would go about doing that. Okay, so hopefully most of you are familiar with this. For those who don't know, the Reporter website is a searchable database of funded projects at NIH. The benefit of this is that you can look at things that have been funded in the last year or two that are not yet published. So has an advantage over looking at publications because you might be planning to propose something that NIH just funded, and you wouldn't know that by looking at publications. So hang on tight. We've got a couple of questions coming in already. Okay, these are unrelated to this. So I'm gonna oh, actually one is related to Reporter. I was planning on applying for an R01. I used Reporter and found that NIDDK was not the right institution. I am a GI person. I was having trouble finding the right NOFO, and some seemed to fit but were nuanced. Any suggestions as to how to find the right NOFO? Email the PO. So that's actually a separate database, and I will grab that URL for you before we finish, but it's actually in Master the R Series Chapter 1 on preparation. There's a lesson on finding the right NOFO, and there's actually a database where you can search active funding opportunity announcements and restrict it by all kinds of things. You can use search terms, you can restrict it by institute, you can restrict it by mechanism, and go in and find it that way. So let's continue with the search. So I would imagine that a lot of you have already used this, but here you would enter, like your PubMed style search terms. And actually what I'm going to do is use information, since I can't use anything from a client for confidentiality reasons. There's this nice webpage from NIH that has some sample applications. And actually, I'll just grab that URL and put that in the chat too, because this is kind of a nice one to have. This is in addition to the sample applications that you find on the NIAID website. So this is a general NIH one. So I clicked on this first one here. My one beef is that I can't find years on these at all. And I have a real problem with that because the scoring criteria and instructions and formats change like every year or two at NIH. So knowing whether an application was from 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is hugely important, and there are no dates on these. So I guess NIH is trying to tell us that we think these are great applications regardless, but I have a problem with that because old applications are missing things that are really kind of mission critical now. So I offered this URL with that caveat. So looking at this, reducing chemotherapy toxicity on older adults, here's the application. So if you were, let's say you had that project idea, you were thinking of proposing this idea, and you just want to see, like, does NIH have they funded things like this in the past? So you might put like reduce chemotherapy toxicity older adults and just see what comes up. So the nice thing here is that you have projects. You can see which institutes are funding them. So not surprisingly, 2 are NCI, but 1 is an INR. You could look at publications that have been reported attached to previous grant applications, and any patents, and clinical studies as well. And all of these have lots of hyperlinks in them. So you could go in and take a look at that. So you might think about targeting these institutes, like this is, yeah, I mean, this you could, if NINR is an appropriate institute for you, you could take a look at that. So, and then the other thing that you would probably want to do in terms of, is NIH funding work like this, you'd probably use more specific search terms than that. Or if you're getting nothing in your search results, back out and do something more general. So in terms of finding the optimal program officer, you could take your draft a project summary and just drop it into the Reporter website and see what comes up in terms of similar projects. And actually you could click also similar program officials and see what comes up. And it's going to be slow today. But those are two very basic things that you would do in terms of vetting your project idea before you actually write anything. So the key things here that you're asking yourself are, does NIH fund work like this? Is it at all interested in funding work like this? Have they already funded something like this, in the last year or two, and I shouldn't bother writing it up? Is there absolutely nothing in the portfolio that looks like this? And if that's the case, why is that? Contact a program officer and ask. And then the other big things are which institutes might be interested in this, because that's an institute you might approach to have a conversation about a draft Ames page before you write it up, and which program officers have similar projects in their portfolio. So here we're pulling up, again, similar projects. There are some, and it looks like NIA has a fair number of these because obviously it's older adults. But I would think with chemotherapy, a lot of this is out of NCI and it's not. So that's kind of interesting to me. So you could go in here and figure out exactly what it is that's going to NIA versus NCI. So, and then if you were to click that other button for program officials, it would lead to program officers that have similar projects in their portfolio with their contact information attached. So that's kind of a nice thing too. So, and then the other thing that I always like to remind people about is, once you have an idea, and we're not going to talk about this in this tutorial, but once you have an idea of the study section you might be interested in, before you write, come back and do a search on the study section. So let's say I was just working with somebody who was looking at CMT. So let's do that one. So this is CMT. Oops, what I forgot to do is I like to restrict by, if you come all the way to the bottom, you can do newly added projects only. And then that would just be the last couple of years, which makes it a lot less unwieldy. Why is nothing coming up? Cellular and molecular technologies and newly added projects. Yeah, I don't know why that's not working, but I don't know why, but anyway, that's how you would typically do that, and it usually works. Let's see, we were talking about TIO too, and that's not even on here. So I will say that typically this does work. So, and the nice thing about it is you can, if you look at the list that comes up, you can see the ones that are added. Like there's a place where the number of the grant ends in like 01, 02. That's the year of the grant. So maybe don't look at things that have like 05 on them because they've been reviewed a while ago. But if you look at something that says 01, that's an indication of something that was reviewed very recently by most of the existing study section, and it would give you a good indication of what that study section finds meritorious at this time. So I'm going to pause there and answer some of these other questions. Okay, so we have 4 other questions in here, and then I had another one that was emailed to me. But feel free to keep typing them in. I'm struggling distinguishing between significance and innovation. Well, this isn't going to be an issue for much longer because in a year, the scoring criteria are going to change and those are going to be mushed together. But anyway, for this year, it's an issue. For example, I noted in my draft R34 application that a focus on a non-traditional setting was novel. That's innovation. A mentor noted it may fit better with significance. Any thoughts, advice? So I think this is a really good question. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. And I think there is some gray area in it. And what I will say is, in addition to my comment that this isn't going to be an issue for much longer because that's all going to be collapsed into a single scoring criteria come 2024. I will say that in all my years of doing this, since the new scoring criteria went into effect in like 2007 or 8, where we had significance and innovation, not once have I ever read a summary statement where a reviewer said, this was listed in innovation and it should have been significance. I'm not sure that, I think as long as you get the information down and they have access to it and can understand the point you're trying to make, I don't think they're going to split hairs about whether it was in significance or innovation. On the whole, innovation has to do with the design of the project itself. So in its most obvious form, it would be like if you have a new technology, or you have some new way of, like it's the first project to use all 4 of these parameters and trying to examine X, Y, and Z, or, like it's, something having to do with the technique or the technology or the design of the project that's new or better or different than what came before. When you start to get into a little bit of a gray area, and significance generally has to do with what is the disease burden and how are you addressing the disease burden. Assuming that you have some sort of a disease burden to talk about, or knowledge gap if it's a basic science project. But there are lots of places where it's a gray area, and your mentor noted one. So if it's a non-traditional setting, well, is that innovation because it's the way the project is designed, or is it significance because it has to do with the people with whom you're working? An argument could be made for either one, and my advice to you is don't lose sleep over this. Just get it. It's more important to write it up in a compelling way and make sure that it's somewhere, or give an extensive write-up on one place and then mention it in the other one. So like you might give it an extensive write-up in the significance section, and then again in innovation mention that, because it's a non-traditional setting, that's an innovation too, but don't then elaborately redescribe it there. You could even refer back to the appropriate section in the significance. And again, don't worry about it too much, because in a year it's not going to matter. It's all going to be one scoring criteria. Okay. I have a question about strategy during the resubmission process. I submitted an R01 that in general got very positive comments from 2 reviewers, but the third reviewer completely misinterpreted our approach and provided incorrect feedback. We discussed with our PO, who suggested bringing this up to the SRO, who acknowledged the issue, but that was the extent of it. We resubmitted the proposal in November and requested to have a proposal submitted to a different study section. We learned yesterday that did not happen. Would you recommend doing anything about this or asking again to change to a different study section? So this is a great question. I get asked some version of this question pretty much every week. And I just finished a call with somebody earlier in the day where they had a very similar problem. So I'm going to back it up because I think that this is such a common problem that I want to explain the decision points all along the process. So you put in an A0 to a specific NOFO. You, I assume, made a request for a study section using the assignment request form, a standing study section, and it went to one that you didn't want, or maybe it went to one that you wanted, but it turned out not to be such a good fit, and you had an assigned reviewer who really didn't get the application. So, for example, the person I spoke with today, their primary reviewer gave them 1s on like significance and innovation, and their tertiary reviewer gave them a 9 in significance and a 7 in innovation, which is like appalling. Like this spread is, really astonishing. So what do you do in that circumstance? You have a number of possibilities. So you could, of course, like the most obvious thing is you could resubmit to the same study section in the same NOFO, but there are lots of good reasons why you wouldn't want to do that, right? So one of the things you could do is go to the same NOFO, but put it in as an A0. So if you change enough of it, particularly the high profile narrative sections of the application, like the title, some wording on the aims page, like tinker with the aims, the project summary, and maybe, like you could change it enough that you've incorporated some feedback from some of the more rational members of the study section. I'm sure some of your reviewers gave you good feedback. Make some changes and change enough of it that you could make a persuasive argument that it's a new submission. You've changed enough of it now that it's a new submission, and that you're putting it in as an A0. The benefit of that is that you could still take advantage of the same NOFO, particularly if it's like a topic specific NOFO that's a great fit for you and you want to go back in to that NOFO. You could go into that NOFO again, but you don't have to address the comments from the reviewer who didn't get it. So you don't have a one-page introduction that basically says, we respectfully disagree, this reviewer didn't understand. You don't, there's no finessing an introduction when you're stuck in that situation and you have to basically call somebody out for not understanding the application. That's never a good thing. So you could put it in as an A0, and then it's disconnected from the previous review. You could put it in for a different NOFO. So you could just abandon the original NOFO and go to as an A0 to a completely different one. In all of these instances, ostensibly, you're still choosing a study section, a standing study section. So among the things you could do there are to, when you fill out your assignment request form, there's a section that says what is your rationale for this assignment. You could not only give the rationale for the assignment, but also give a rationale for why you don't think you should go to the other study section that you have been assigned to in the past. And it can't simply be this person didn't get it. You have to give some scientific rationale for why scientifically that study section is not a good fit. So those are some of the things you can do to prevent it to avoid addressing the comments from the reviewer who didn't get it, and to try to avoid going to that study section, that bad study section. If you get assigned to the bad study section again, in my experience, I don't know of anybody who's ever been able to get a reassignment after an assignment like that. If anybody knows of an instance, let me know, but I've never heard of that happening. But what you can do in that instance is immediately, once you see that assignment, that it's gone back to the original study section, email the SRO and request that you could say that in order to get a fair and impartial review, I would need XYZ expertise represented on the panel, or would you be willing to consider adding an ad hoc member who would bring that expertise to the panel? And the phrase you always want to use is in order to get a fair and impartial review. So those are among the things you could do. Again, once the assignment occurs, I've never heard of anybody being able to get it changed. And once the review occurs, I have heard occasionally of somebody disputing a review and saying it was unfair for various reasons, such as big spread in the scores or other reasons that they named. And I've never seen anything come of that, except upsetting various staff members at CSR and NIH, which you don't want to do. So anyway, those are some of my suggestions for how you might handle that. Let's see. And I have like an extensive, you could watch my master resubmissions course, which really walks through like all of the decision-making process and what to do when you're really unhappy with a set of reviews. Okay, another non-related to the current topic question for when there's an opportunity: if you propose to adapt an existing intervention, would you recommend, do you think it's necessary to draw on an adaptation model, i.e. cite a particular approach to adaptation? No, I can think of many applications where they did not do that. Sometimes there's some sort of theoretical model that would guide the decision making around adapting it, say, to a different population. But I can think of several applications that I've seen recently where they didn't cite an adaptation, a model for adapting, if that makes sense. So yes, to theoretical models for, why you need the adaptation conceptually to better fit a different population, but not, I've seen many where they don't talk about an adaptation model. Again, if anybody knows of has something different to say about that or a different experience, please let us know. I've used Reporter and Matchmaker tools and I'm struggling to find the right note. Oh, right. That was the other question. So let me see if I can quickly pull up. I'm probably not going to be able to do that and answer my emailed question. So for this person, I'm going to suggest, and I'll come back with the URL next time. But in Master the R Series Chapter 1, there is a lesson on finding the appropriate NOFO, and I give a URL for a search engine for that. And even if you don't want to watch any of the lessons, if you just go to lesson 1, where I have the supplements you can download, there's a list of URLs and the URL is in there. So, but let me get to, there's one question that somebody emailed me ahead of time. This is in reference to a T32. The graduate school at our university does not keep track of the total applicant pool for each lab. Therefore, we must ask the participating faculty for these numbers to complete Table 6B in a T32 application. Do we request this information from mentors only, or mentors and executive committee members who have been postdocs in the past? The table is for the most current completed year, in addition to the prior 4 years. My sense is it would probably be just the mentors and not the executive committee members who have had postdocs in the past, because you have 4 years of data. I think it's just the mentors, but I would double check. Any questions like that you have about the table, I generally recommend that people ask the program officers, but I'm pretty sure it's just the mentors. So, okay. And since we still have 2 minutes, I'm going to see if I can quickly come up with that. The information for that other person. Okay. Whoops. Search engine for active NOFOs. Here it is. Okay, so if you are looking for NOFOs, and I'm just going to screen share this. All right, so this is where you would come to look for active NOFOs. So you could put a search term here, chemotherapy toxicity. And you could, let's say you wanted to look at R01 only. And let's say you wanted to do NIH and restrict it to NCI. And there you go. So I will drop that in the chat. Okay. No, one thing that I should say is that this is a combination not just of active NOFOs, but sometimes you get the NOCs in there as well, the Notice of Special Interest, which is an umbrella under which one or more funding opportunity announcements appear. So, just be aware that it's not that there are necessarily 16 of these. There might be NOCs mixed in here too. Although it looks like it's mostly... Oh, no, in this instance, there are 16 active ones. just you would look here. So there's an RFA, PAR, et cetera. These are all NOFOs, but just be aware that sometimes NOCs are mixed in there. So, okay, and that brings us to time, and we got through all our questions. Yay. Okay, so thank you all for attending. I think next time our topic is how R35 applications are reviewed. So we talked a while back about R35s, and there was we got a question about how they were reviewed. And as we dug into it, we were kind of like, oh my gosh, this is really very involved. So we decided to make a whole separate tutorial and blog post just on how R35s are reviewed. So that'll be in 2 weeks. My friend Becky Miro will be coming to present on that. And we'll look forward to speaking with you then. And as always, feel free to email me, meg@megbouvier.com, with suggestions for tutorial topics or guests. We're looking at setting up some topics for the spring. So we're always happy to take suggestions from anybody about what they might like to see. And feel free always to come with your questions. I love to talk about grants, so grant applications. So, but that's it for us today. So everybody have a great day and good luck with your grant writing. Take care. Bye-bye.